Okay, hello everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Okay, so the next program in chapter 6 is random number file reader. Alright, so this exercise assumes you have completed programming exercise 7, random number file writer. That's the name of the programming exercise 7. Write another program that reads the random numbers from the file. Display the numbers and then display the following data. The total of all the numbers, the total of all the numbers and the total of random numbers read from the file. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and open that program, the program we wrote for number 7, the previous program. So, on the desktop I have it here in Python, Programming Challenges Chapter 6, and we have it here as random number file writer. Alright, so actually let me go ahead and open this. So I'll open this on the side, and this program basically asks the user to type in how many random numbers they want to write to a file. And so once you type in 5, for example, the program will go ahead and create 5 random numbers in the file. And that was it. So this new program, which is 8, is asking us to read from that file and then display the following information. So in the last program, I think I messed up with it again. So in the text file, it's only 2 numbers in here. Let's go ahead and run the old program, which is chapter 7. Which is the 7th program, the previous program. Let's run it so we can, let's say, it wants us to save this one first. It wants us to save the new one first. So I'm going to go ahead and save the new one in the folder. So let's see, desktop, Python, Programming Challenges Chapter 6. I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder for this one, and I'll call it random number file reader. And over here, I'm going to, save the file with the same name, random number file reader.py. Alright, so I've saved the new program as random number file reader.py, and this is the old program. Let me kind of shift it here. It doesn't allow me to. Anyway, alright, so I'm going to run our previous program so we can write some numbers to the file. How many numbers should the random file hold? I'm going to type in 5 numbers and hit enter. Now it says 5 numbers have been written to the file randomnumbers.txt. Now this is the file we are going to be reading from in our new program, random number file reader. Let's just go ahead and open the folder open the folder of the previous program where the file is, where the file that the file that contains a random number is, and see if the 5 numbers are in there. And we can see that there are 5 random numbers in here. So this is the file we are going to read from. Now you can go ahead in this old program and save the file directly in our new folder here, in a new folder which contains this file, or you can make a copy of this file and paste it there. And that's what I'm going to do. We have a file that was generated from our previous program containing 5 numbers. I'm going to make a copy of it. Go back to our new folder we just created. So random number file reader. We have our program here, and then paste that file. We are going to read from this file, randomnumbers.txt. It contains 5 numbers. Alright, so let's go ahead and close the old program because we know what it does, and we've used it to generate our file that contains the random numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and close it. Command W on Mac to close it. Alright, so now we have let's go ahead and clear this. We have our new file, our new program, and we are going to first of all read from this file, right? So we have certain functions in this question. We first of all have to display all the numbers in the file, find the total of all the numbers in the file, and then say how many random numbers the file holds. So we can go ahead and create 3 separate functions for it, but I'm going to go ahead and create just one function, that's going to do everything. Because creating 3 separate functions means sometimes we have to open the file and close it in each function. It may happen to be the case, and I don't want to really do that. So I'm going to create one function, and that function is going to basically read from the file, display all the numbers, calculate the total, and then also determine how many numbers are in the file. Alright, so I'm going to define a function, and I'm going to call it display numbers. Okay, display numbers is going to basically do all the 3 functions here. So display numbers, right? Display numbers is, let's see if it's going to accept in any arguments. All right, so if we are going to display numbers, then we are going to display numbers in a certain file, right? So let's define a parameter, which is going to be the file that we are going to display numbers. Okay, we're going to read from to display the numbers. So I'm going to create a parameter. I'm going to call it file to be read, right? Because this is the file that's going to be read. If someone calls this function, the person also has to provide this file that we should read from and display the numbers. So in the function, we want to go ahead and open. Actually, this is going to be the file name, right? So you can name it file name, but when I say file to be read, that's what I mean. I mean the file name of the file that we want to open and read from. So you can call this something close to that. But when I say file to be read, that's what I mean by that. All right, so let's go ahead and open. Okay, this file that's going to be passed to this function. The open function, okay, allows us to open a specific file in a certain mode. Now the file that we want to open is the file that's going to be passed to this function, which is file to be read. So I'm going to go ahead and paste it here as the first argument of the open function. And then we also have to now determine what mode we want to open this file in. Do we want to open it in read mode, in write mode, or append mode? So the question over here says, assume that you've completed the program exercise 7. So write another program that reads the random numbers from the file. So we are going to read this file, which means we should open this file in read mode. We are opening the file so that we can only read from it. And the way we show in code that we are opening a file in read mode is with the letter R, either in double quotations, okay, or single quotations, whichever one is okay for you. But I'm used to single double quotations. So I'm opening this file that's going to be provided to us in read mode. Once you provide these two arguments to the open function will create a file object in memory, and it will return the memory address of that file. It will give back the memory. It will tell us, okay, a file has been created in memory. Here is the address. Here is the location of the file in memory. So when it's returning that memory address to us, we need a place to store it. So I'm going to go ahead and create a variable. And I'm going to give it a name. Let's see. I'm thinking of a name to give it. I'll call it file to be open for now, I guess. File. I don't know. You can give it any name. I'm just thinking of something that's reasonable. If this is okay, then I'll leave it. File to be open. File to be read. Actually, if we've done this and we've already opened it, so let's call it random numbers file, right? Because it's really the random numbers file we are opening. All right. So the open function is going to return the memory address of that file that has been created here in read mode, or opened here in read mode, and we are going to store it here in this variable. So in other words, this is our file. This variable here points to our file directly. Okay, when we use this, we are referring to our file. So now let's go ahead and try to read from this file. Right, so this becomes an object, right? Because, well, first of all, it's pointing to our file object. And, file objects have functions, right? A function, okay, that belongs to an object is called a method, right? It's just a function that belongs to an object. The function, objects perform functions. Okay, when you apply a function to an object, it becomes a method. So one of the methods, or one of the functions that you can apply to a method, a file object, okay, is called readline. So random numbers file, I'm going to call it. I'm going to make a call to it. I'm going to access that method that belongs to this object here. I'm going to access it with the dot operator or the access operator. So I'm calling the name of the file. Okay, and then I'm accessing the method readline. Okay, I hope you don't get confused here. All right, so what readline will do is, let me go ahead and open the file. What readline will do is, first of all, every file has a read position. The read position starts from the beginning. Let me go ahead and open this actually in full. Yeah, so every file has a read position. When you open a file for the very first time, the read position is at the beginning of the line here. So when you call this method. Okay, again, this variable here, it's basically storing our file object. It's storing the memory address of our file object. When we use it, we are pointing to our file directly. We are calling this function. Okay, this function belongs to this object here. When a function belongs to an object, it's called a method. We are using the dot operator or the access operator to access this function here that belongs to this object. We are calling readline, and what readline will do is it will start from the read position of the file, and it will read the very first line. It will read everything on the very first line, and then it will return it. It will return it to us as a string. And so when we call readline, when we call readline and it's returning what's on the first line as a string, we need a place to store it, right? So I'm going to create a variable here, and I'm going to call it line. So line is going to store whatever is on the first line. Okay, basically whatever has been read on that particular line. Now, as soon as you call readline and it reads, that particular line, it moves the read position from the end of this line to the beginning of the next line here. And so that's where the read position will be. And it will stay there until you call readline again. And if you call readline again, it will go ahead and read this line. And then it will move the read position to the beginning of the next line. And it will wait for you to call readline again. And when you call readline again, it's going to read the next line, and so on and so forth. So we call readline for the first time. It reads this line here, and it moves the read position from the end of this line to the beginning of this line and waits for us there. So let's keep it there for now. But we know that once it's read this line, 198 will be stored here as a string. Okay, when we read from a file, whatever is read from the file is going to be stored initially as a string. Now, sometimes it's very possible that this file contains nothing. So where is it? It's very possible that this file contains nothing. So we need to because let's say, assuming this file is empty, if we call readline, it reads nothing. We want to make sure that this file has something before we can work with it. So we have to check that. If we've read the first line, let's check to see if, first of all, it was able to read something on this particular line here, right? Let's check. So anytime you call readline and it wasn't able to read anything, anytime you call readline and it encounters an empty file and reads nothing, this readline method will return, this whole line will return an empty string. It wouldn't return anything on the line. It will return an empty string because it tried to read something from the line and found nothing. So if we're reading from a file that we don't see the content, in this case we happen to see the content of this file, but if we're reading from a file where we don't see the content, we wouldn't know if the file contains something or not. So if it contains something, we have to, whether it contains something or not, we have to check first to make sure. And the way we check is, we know we've read the first line, 198. Let's check to see if that line, okay, we are going line by line. Let's check to see if that line contains something. And I'm going to use a while loop to do that. So while line, okay, is not equal to, I'm going to use a exclamation sign and an equal to, which means not equal to. Now remember I said that when you call the read line and there is nothing in the file, it reads nothing, so it returns an empty string. So we want to make sure that the line is not equal to an empty string, because if it's equal to an empty string, that means the file is empty. So we only want to do something when this line here is not equal to an empty string. We want to do something when the file is not empty. We only want to do something when the file contains something. So while line is not equal to, an empty string, and this is what we denote with an empty string. This is a string, but it's empty. This is a space. Okay, there's a space in here, but if I remove the space, this becomes an empty string. So while line is not equal to an empty string, okay, which means while line contains something, first of all, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and convert whatever is stored in line, okay, to a number. Now we know that there are numbers stored in this file, but I mentioned that when you call readline, it reads whatever is returned from the readline method is returned as a string. So it will read this 198, store that in line, the variable line, but line will contain 198 not as a number but as a string. But we can't work with strings. We need it as a number so we can perform calculations with it or things like that. So that means we have to go ahead and convert whatever is stored in line to a number. So while line is not equal, while we were able to try to read from this line, okay, while I'm mixing up words here. While we were able to read from this line and this line actually contained something. This line wasn't empty. Let's go ahead and do something. Let's go ahead and convert whatever is stored in line to, in this case, an int, because we're only dealing with random integers here. So let's go ahead and convert whatever is stored in line, okay, to an int. I'm going to go ahead and wrap whatever is stored in line here. Oops, let me just do that. I'm going to go ahead and wrap whatever is stored in line here with an int function, which means I'm going to convert whatever is stored in line to an integer. Now, when you're done with this, the int function was going to go ahead and return whatever is stored in line here, okay, from a string. It's going to first of all convert it from a string to an int and return that integer value. So when it's returning that integer value, we need a place to store it. So I'm going to go ahead and create a variable. I'm going to call it number, and number is actually, let's call it random number. And random number is going to store whatever is stored in line converted to an int, right? And let's go ahead and print it, because first of all, this is a loop, right? We're going to keep iterating through this file line by line. We've read the first line. We've checked to make sure that it wasn't nothing, like it wasn't empty, okay? While line is not equal to an empty string. If it's not empty, that means it contains something. So if it contains something, then go ahead and convert whatever is stored in line to a number, because we need numbers and not strings, and then print it out. So I'm going to call the print function and then print out what's stored in random number. That's going to be a random number, right? So print it out. Let's see. Now we know that by default, the print function ends with a new line character, meaning it's going to print out this, break the position from the end of that line to the next line, and then, you know, display the next thing, and so on and so forth. So let's print that number. All right. So if we've read this line here, made sure that it's not empty, we've converted to a number, and we've printed it, then we need to go ahead and read the next line, right? Because remember, the read position will be here. Once you call read line, it reads this line and moves the read position from the end of this line to the beginning of this line, and wait for us to call read line again in order to read this line. If we don't call read line again and we allow this loop to keep running, line will still contain 198. So this will be an infinite loop, because every time line will contain 198. Unless we call read line again, it wouldn't go ahead and read the next line. We only read 198, and then we read 198 and then move the position from the end of the line to the beginning of this line here. It will wait for us to call read line again in order to read the next line, right? Again, if we don't call read line, line will always contain 198, and this will keep on looping. It will convert 198. It will first of all make sure 198 is not empty. It will convert it to a number and then print it out, and then keep going. So once we are done with one particular line, let's go ahead and call read line again. I'm going to go ahead and call random numbers, which is the name of the file object, random numbers file dot read line. Let's go ahead and call read line again. So when we do that, now it's going to go ahead, because the read position is here now, it's going to go ahead and read 305, and then it's going to return 305 as a string back to us. And when it's returning that, we need a place to store it. So just like this line. Line is going to store whatever was read from that particular line. So just like this line. The only difference is this is outside the loop, runs only once, and this is inside a loop, runs each time that the while loop, you know, keeps iterating. So that means we read the next line over here and store the value in line, and then the while loop will go ahead and do its thing. It will check to make sure that particular line is not empty, and if it's not empty, that means it contains something. So go ahead and convert that string, because by default the read line always returns a string. Go ahead and convert what's stored in that string and store it in the variable random number, and then print it out. And then go ahead and call read line again so we can read the next line, because anytime you call read line, for example, when we read 305, this line 305, the read position would be adjusted from the end of this line to the beginning of this line, and it will wait for us to call read line again in order to read 202, which because it's a loop, it iterates all the time. So when it reads 202, it will adjust the read position from the end of this line to the beginning of this line here, and wait for us to call read line again. So I hope you get how it works. I know I'm talking too much, but I just want this to be clear. All right, so by having a structure like this, we are reading through the file. We are going line by line, making sure that each line is not empty, right? and then doing something. We are converting it to an integer and displaying it. If the line is empty, then this what's in the while loop won't run. Okay, then what's in the while loop won't run, and anything below the while loop is what's going to run. In this case, we have nothing, so nothing will happen unless we put something there. Right, so by doing this, we're basically going through the file and then reading line by line, making sure it's not empty and doing something. All right, so we can actually test this out to see how it's working so far, right? So let's run this. We may encounter some errors, but let's see. Actually, this is not going to do anything because we've only defined the function, and we have to call the function for anything to happen.